Hello everyone. So this is a strategy video for Indian economy for candidates who are planning to appear in 2026 and wants to know how to get started with the subject. So let's start. Now we'll start by looking at the syllabus. And first of all, let's look at the prelims syllabus. Now in your prelims examination, Indian economy is part of paper 1, which is worth 200 marks. As you all know, paper 2 is CSAT, which is a qualifying paper, and therefore paper 1 is the most important paper for prelims examination. Now here you have different subjects. You have your history, you have your geography, polity, environment, and you have your Indian economy. Now the syllabus of Indian economy is given in a single line. It says economic and social development, sustainable development, poverty, inclusion, demographics, social sector initiatives, etc. Now, this is a very vague syllabus. It gives you some idea of the kind of question that UPSC is going to ask, but in the previous years, UPSC has asked an array of questions from different parts of Indian economy. So a very good idea of what UPSC is going to ask comes from your previous year questions. Now let's look at the weightage of Indian economy in your prelims examination and going by past trends. As you can see here, UPSC has been asking quite a number of questions from Indian economy. In 2020, 14 questions, then 15 questions. 2022 was again around 18 questions. So 14 questions, 13 questions. So right around 14 to 15 question UPSC has been asking. Now this can go up and down also. Now in 2025, the weightage of Indian economy increased a lot more, and this time 20 questions were asked from Indian economy. Now this is significant, but next year again, UPSC may again come down to 14, 15 questions, may even ask 20 questions, maybe even lower. But you get an idea that Indian economy remains very important. It is a very essential part of your prelim syllabus. So if we are talking about the weightage of the subject, so out of all the subjects, we can say that Indian economy constitutes around 15% of marks, right? Now let's talk about the types of questions that UPSC is going to ask in the examination. Now I have broadly divided into four major types of questions. The first are your very basic questions in which your concepts are tested. For example, this year there was a question on circular economy, a very basic question on circular economy, the definition of circular economy and the different characteristics, right? So now if you have read a standard book or read your NCRTs and have good clarity of concepts, these are the questions which you can easily answer. The next type of questions are your application-based questions in which you need to have theoretical knowledge of the topic, but also should have deep understanding so that you are able to apply that knowledge into the question. For example, this year there was a question on different types of deficits, right? So you were provided figures for revenue expenditure, you were provided figures for revenue receipts, borrowings, interest payments, and then there was different statements, and you were asked to identify the correct statement. So for this, you have to know the formula of revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and primary deficit. So again, you have to have theoretical concepts, very clear concepts, and then you have to apply it. So these are application-based questions. The next type of questions are your current affair based questions. So these are the questions from the topics which have been in news and which news articles you must have read in the newspaper or in the economic survey, maybe mentioned in the budget. For example, this question asked in 2025 about business responsibility and sustainable reports filed by listed companies. Okay. So this again was part of your economic survey. So if you have read the economic survey, this is the questions that you can handle very easily. And a fourth type of questions are some very random questions that you basically tend to ask every year. There are few, at least one or two questions which are very random, and it is very difficult to prepare for these sort of questions. So again, I will not give you any strategy for tackling these random questions, because again, if you know these questions, well and good. If you don't know, it will be just as difficult for other people to answer it, and therefore it will not have any final impact on the results. So these are the questions that you're lucky you'll be able to answer, but generally there is no way to prepare for these sort of questions. Now, again, This question has been asked this year. So again, from the next year, this will be in the notes of various coaching institutes. But again, what UPSC is going to ask next year, you never know. Okay. So generally, I recommend that candidates should be prepared to answer these three types of questions. And then random questions is based on your luck, and luck always plays a part in your prelims examination. It is not something to worry about. You cannot always be 100% prepared for everything. But these basic questions, these application-based questions, and these current affairs-based questions, these you should be able to answer with very high accuracy. Now, if we divide these types of questions into broadly static and dynamic, right? So static are your theoretical questions for which you don't have to have knowledge of the current affairs, whereas dynamic is your current affairs based questions. Then if we talk about the weightage from the previous year trends, it has been seen that 70% of your questions are static based questions. And therefore, the primary focus of your preparation should be books, standard books, NCRTs, right? Only after you have covered your NCRTs and standard books, only then you should move on to current affairs resources like the newspapers and the economic survey, because this portion is going to fetch you the maximum marks. Obviously, this is important too, but first you must focus on your statics, make your base strong, and only after that you move on to your current affairs preparation. Now let's look at the mains syllabus, right? Now, if in your mains, Indian economy is part of your GS3 paper. Now, GS3 paper, apart from Indian economy and agriculture, agriculture is also part of Indian economy. So we'll generally study this together. Apart from this, you also have science and tech, environment and disaster management, internal security. Now, this Indian economy and agriculture together will consist of 100 marks, right? So that is 40% of your GS3 paper. Again, if we look at the syllabus, now unlike the prelims syllabus, which is very brief and very vague, the main syllabus is much more detailed. The main syllabus can be broadly divided into the Indian economy portion of the syllabus and agriculture. So in Indian economy, you have Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development, and employment, inclusive growth and issues arising from it, government budgeting, effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy, their effect on industrial growth, infrastructure like energy, ports, roads, airports, railways, investment models. So this is part of your Indian economy portion. And then you have your agriculture portion, which is also equally important as the rest of the Indian economy, because half the questions, 50 marks worth of questions, will come from agriculture. In agriculture, again, you have a very detailed syllabus. It talks of major crops, cropping patterns, different types of irrigation, storage, transport, and marketing of agriculture produce, e-technology in the aid of farmers, direct and indirect farm subsidies, minimum support prices, public distribution systems, their objectives, functionings, limitations, revamping, buffer stocks, technology missions, animal rearing. Then we move on to food processing, right? Food processing is also in the industry very closely related to agriculture. Their scope and significance, their requirements, supply chain management, and finally land reforms in India. So this is your agriculture portion of Indian economy, and again very important from your mains point of view, because 15 marks worth of questions is going to come from agriculture. If we look at the questions from your mains examination, then this is the trend that UPSC has been following from the past 5 to 6 years. So this is the trend that we expect the UPSC to follow next year too. So the first two questions, question number 1 and question number 2, worth 10 marks, is going to be from Indian economy. Then question number 3 and question number 4, again, both 10 markers, is going to be from agriculture. Then there are other questions from science and tech, environment, internal security. And again, question number 11 and 12, these are 15 markers, will be from Indian economy. And question number 13 and 14, again, 15 markers will be from agriculture. So you see a total of 4 10 markers, 4 15 markers, that is total 100 marks worth of questions from Indian economy and agriculture. So if we're talking about weightage, so the weightage has been quite consistent Every year, UPSC has been asking 8 questions. Sometimes even it can go a little higher, 9 questions in 2022. But 8 to 9 questions is what we expect from the Indian economy portion of your GS3 syllabus. Okay. If we talk about the weightage in GS3, then we have already discussed that it is 40%, right? In economy and agriculture together forms 40% of your GS3. And if we are talking about the mains as a whole, which has a total of 4 GS papers, 2 optional papers, and 1 essay paper, then we can say that Indian economy consists of around 6% of your main syllabus. Now, why we are talking about the weightage of the subject is because this will give you an idea of how much time you should dedicate to the subject. Because Indian economy is a vast subject. There are people who take economics as an optional subject also. There are people who do PhDs in the subject. So there is no end to the depth and breadth of the subject. And if you dive into it and spend more time into it, you will always find more stuff to read in the subject. And therefore, it is very important that you allocate only that much time to the subject, what it is going to be uh, worth for you. So it consists of 6% of your main syllabus, and accordingly, you have to allocate that much time so that you have enough time for other subjects also. Okay. So generally, if you have 1 year to prepare for the whole syllabus for your prelims and your mains, then generally it is recommended that out of 1 year, 4 months you dedicate to your optional, right? Then another 2 months just before your prelims examination, you do a more prelims dedicated study. This leaves you around 6 months for 4 GS papers and essay. And out of this, for your GS3, again, you will have your 1.5 months to prepare, right? Now, Indian economy is 40% of your GS3. So around 40% of this, and then maybe prelims again, you have some time you will dedicate to Indian economy. So from this time, roughly around 25 days to 1 month, right? So if you stretch it, 1 month is all you have to cover your Indian economy. Now, this 1 month, when you are dedicating whole days to just one subject, obviously, if you do two subjects in a day, then maybe you can stretch this 1 month to 2 months, right? As per your convenience. But this just gives you a rough idea of how much time you should dedicate to the subject. Now, let's define our target. What is the target that we want to achieve while tackling Indian economy? First of all, we want to have a strong base, right? Now, we have already seen that 70% of your question will be from the static portion. So your understanding of theory, your understanding of the subject is going to fetch you 70% of the marks. And therefore, a strong base is very important. Now, for a strong base, you need to have clarity of concepts. So the concepts and economy is a little technical subject where you will learn about many new words, many new concepts, many new definitions, and therefore you should be very clear of what is meant by what is meant by GDP, what is meant by inflation, what is meant by monetary policy, fiscal policy, those sort of things. Now, apart from a strong base, once you have built a strong base, you also need to have good grasp over current affairs. Okay. Now, this is very important. Obviously, from prelims point of view, 30% of your question is going to be from current affairs, but also from your mains point of view, in your mains examination, you will have questions and generally you will know the answers to those questions. But if you can also integrate some data, some current affairs examples, some case studies in your answers, that raises the quality of your answers, and therefore you need good grasp over current affairs. And finally, you should have ability to do interlinkage between the static and dynamic portions of your subject. What do I mean by this is that if you have studied about, suppose, GDP in your book, now when you study about GDP, you study the definition, you study the components of GDP, right? You study how it is calculated. but you should also have an idea of the dynamic portions of GDP. What is the GDP of India? Okay. What is the GDP growth rate? Or what is the rank of India in terms of GDP when compared to other major economies of the world? So should have an idea of rank, or you should have an idea of what is driving the GDP of India. So that is where you should have good interlinkages between the static portion of your subject and the dynamic portions of your subject. Now that we have seen the syllabus and decided that what do we want to achieve, let's look at the sources that you're going to be using. And again, the sources I've divided into static and dynamic. Now in the static portion, you have your NCRTs, which are very basic book and good for light reading and good for building a very strong base. So you have your NCRTs, and then you have a standard book. Now in NCRTs, there are two NCRTs that I recommend. The first one is class 11th Indian Economic Development, and the next one is class 12th NCRT, which is Introductory Macroeconomics. Now these are the two NCRTs. You can go before also, and you can cover class 10th and class 9th NCRTs. Those are very thin booklets, and you can maybe finish them in just one day. But even if you don't worry, these are the NCRTs, and in the standard book, everything is going to get repeated. So two NCRTs, class 11th Indian Economic Development and class 12th Introductory Macroeconomics. And then you move on to a standard book. Now, standard book is important because NCRT alone is not going to suffice. You have to have understanding of the subject, which is going to be at a level higher than the NCRTs that you study in your class 11th and 12th. And therefore, it is important to read a standard book. Now, this standard book is where most of the heavy lifting will be done by you. This is where your concepts are going to get clarified. This is where you will build a strong base. So pick your standard books very carefully. There are a few good standard books available in the market. Now, Indian Economy Handbook has been authored by me, and it has great reviews, and I feel very confident recommending it. So you can go for Indian Economy Handbook, but you can also go for a few other good books that are available in the market. So do ask around your peers, your friends, and because this is a book with which you'll spend a significant amount of time, you should be very sure that you have picked a good book. You can obviously go for Indian Economy Handbook, and I highly recommend it. But again, for your own confidence, you may like to ask around a few friends or seniors. All right. Now let's move on to the dynamic portion of the sources, where the sources from which you are going to cover your current affairs, and in which the most important resource is going to be your economic survey and the budget. Now, every year, the government of India presents the budget in the parliament on 1st of February. So, 1st of February 2026, the government of India will present the budget. And one day before the budget, the government will also publish the economic survey. Now, the economic survey is like a report card of the Indian economy, the performance of Indian economy in past financial year. So again, a very important document, and it gives you an idea of how the Indian economy is performing as a whole, and also how the different sectors of Indian economy is performing. So how the agriculture, industry, services sector are performing. And this will also give you a lot of good, important data, which will be useful for both your prelims examination as well as your mains examination. So this remains the most important current affair resource for Indian economy. And apart from economic survey and the budget, you must make a habit of reading at least one newspaper daily. Now, you can either pick the Hindu or the Indian Express. These two are the most read newspapers by UPSC aspirant. So, you can pick either one, or you can even keep on changing your newspaper. So, maybe Indian Express for 2 months and then 2 months of the Hindu, whatever suits you. But read the newspaper daily, and do keep an eye out for important articles on Indian economy. Now that we have sorted out the sources for Indian economy, let's see how to approach these sources. How do we study it, right? So first you start with the NCRTs. Now these are very thin booklets and should not take too many days. So you start with your 11th standard NCRT, then move on to the 12th standard Introductory Macroeconomics. Now, a thing about this book that the later chapters of Introductory Macroeconomics is a bit theoretical. There are equations and graphs and numericals there. You don't have to get into all of that, but read the theoretical portions of this book, Introductory Macroeconomics. Now, once you have finished the NCRT, then you can move on to the standard book. Now, as I've already told you, this is where most of the heavy lifting will be done with respect to this subject. In your standard book, your concepts will become clear. You will feel much more confident about the subject once you have completed the standard book. All right. Now, after you have completed the standard book, you should start making notes. Now, here I do want to tell you that in your UPSCprep.com course, the essential course, I am the Indian economy faculty there and I cover both NCRTs and the Indian economy handbook in great detail. So yeah, you can take advantage of that. Now, once you have covered the standard book, you should start preparing your own notes. And I cannot emphasize it enough that how important your notes is going to be for you. When the exam approaches, you're not going to go back to the book, to the bulky books to revise. You won't be able to revise that much. But if you have your own concise notes, then you can quickly go through your notes and do a revision, and it is going to be very handy for you. But more than the revision, it is the whole process of making your own notes. And through this process, your concepts is going to become even more clearer, and once you integrate your notes with some current affairs data and examples, then these are the things that will stick to your mind, and ultimately you will be able to reproduce it in the examination hall. So you make your notes. Now, once you have covered the NCRTs and the standard book, you also start reading newspapers. Now, newspaper articles are not going to make much sense before you have read the book, so don't worry about that. But once you have read the standard book, newspaper articles is going to make sense, and then you start integrating some important articles from the newspaper, some important data into your notes. Then once the economic survey is released, so economic survey and the budget will come out next year on 31st of January and 1st of February. So once that is released, you read that also and then integrate important data and important points from there into your notes. So this is going to be an ongoing process. It is not something that is once done, it's over. It is an ongoing process, and your notes are going to keep on evolving. Okay. Now also, and this I recommend for to you to do simultaneously. Once you have finished the standard book and you have started making your notes, you should also start doing some answer writing, and particularly previous year questions. So you should start attempting previous year questions, and this will also give you an idea of the type of questions that UPSC has been asking and what are the things that should go into your notes. So this will give you a very good idea of how to prepare your notes. At the same time, you will start becoming more confident with your answer writing, which is very important because ultimately in the mains examination, that is the thing that you're going to do. You're going to write answers. So do some answer writing. Now, once you have written answers, obviously the initial answers are not going to be of very good quality. There is going to be need for lots of improvement. So you identify gaps in your answers. What are the things that you can integrate? Maybe a example, or maybe a good diagram, or maybe a good introduction or a good conclusion. So these are the gaps that you identify in your answers. And once you have identified gaps, you go back to your resources, right? You go back to your resources, you pick up that information that is lacking in your notes and you put them in your notes. You can also do internet searches. So something you have come across that maybe not be there in the book. So you can do a good quick internet search. Nowadays, even artificial intelligence is available to you. So that is even a very good resource. So you can do ChatGPT is also very good at explaining complex concepts in very simple terms. So you can make use of that. These are the resources available to use. So why not use it? And finally, these this whole process is going to get repeated time and again, because this is going to be a continuous process. The UPSC exam is a journey, and you have to improve one step at a time. You're not going to become very good very quickly. It is going to take some time and effort and perseverance from your end. But once you do it enough number of times, your quality of answers are going to improve. Your marks are going to improve. Now, here I also have some don'ts for you, some things that I want you to avoid. This is also very important. The first one is that you should not use multiple standard books, right? So the standard book is where you're going to learn your theory from, where you're going to learn your concepts from. There are many good ones available in the market, but use only one. And I say this because if you pick up too many resources, there is going to be a lot of duplication of efforts. And yeah, UPSC you have limited amount of time, so don't waste it. Don't use multiple standard books. All the standard books will have more or less similar concepts, similar content. So pick one. If you are picking Indian Economy Handbook, obviously you can do that. It is I do recommend it, and it comes with great reviews. So you can pick that, but don't pick multiple. Second is don't procrastinate. Procrastination is a habit of people who are not winners, right? Sometimes you get lost in your mobile phone, scrolling the social media or doing some other work, and leave your studies, and that is going to pile up the pendency. So you don't want that. You want to be very regular in your studies, and at least some amount of discipline. Now, this does not mean that you have to study every day. Every now and then you can take a break. That is also important for mental health and for refreshment, but don't let pendency pile up. So don't procrastinate. The third is do not rely on toppers' notes. Now, every year there are so many toppers, and they will put up their notes online for everyone to download. But your notes are should be your own baby. It should be prepared by you, because it is the journey of making notes that makes you so good. So don't rely on toppers' notes. The toppers' notes were good for the toppers. If you want to become a topper, you have to prepare your own topper notes. Right. And fourth is don't be afraid of answer writing. The first few answers you write is going to be of very poor quality. I can tell you right now with guarantee, but that should not deter you. You should keep on writing, make incremental improvements, and one day you will be able to write very good quality answers which will be worthy of becoming a topper's answers, right? So don't be afraid of answer writing. So these are the few don'ts I have. I hope now it is very clear to you how to approach the subject. So I wish you the best. Thank you very much.